Today, we are diving deep into one of the most famous conversations ever recorded. On the surface, it's a simple chat at a well. But if you look just a little closer, you'll find layers of social scandal, mind-blowing theology, and a message that would echo for thousands of years. Let's get into it.
So that's really the big question, isn't it? How does a thirsty man asking a woman for a drink of water become this revolutionary story that shatters all the rules of its time? Well, that's exactly what we're here to unpack.
Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at why this conversation was so forbidden. Then, we'll dive into the metaphor of living water. After that, we'll see how it completely redefines worship, watch the woman's incredible transformation, and finally, explore the story's lasting impact through history.
Okay, first things first. We absolutely have to understand the invisible walls that stood between the two people in this story. This isn't just a man talking to a woman. This was a moment that, by all social and religious rules of the day, should never, ever have happened.
You have to picture this deep historical animosity. For centuries, Jews and Samaritans were caught in this bitter rivalry, both religiously and ethnically. Jews were convinced the Jerusalem temple was the one and only true place to worship God. The Samaritans? They held to their sacred mountain, Mount Gerizim. And this wasn't some friendly disagreement, it was a deep, hostile separation.
And get this, the tension is way deeper than it looks on the surface. The original Greek phrase here for share things in common implies so much more than just, avoiding each other. It means they wouldn't even use the same cups or bowls for fear of becoming ritually unclean. So for Jesus, a respected Jewish teacher, to ask to drink from a Samaritan woman's cup, that was utterly scandalous.
The setting itself is just loaded with meaning. Jacob's well. It connects both groups back to a shared ancestor, a kind of forgotten unity. And the timing, the 6th hour or high noon, is so important. This wasn't the cool morning or evening when everyone else came to get water. No, this was the hottest, most exposed time of day, almost like a symbol for the raw, revealing conversation that's about to unfold. Okay, so let's move into the heart of their dialogue. This is where things get really interesting, because Jesus uses this classic literary move, a simple misunderstanding that opens the door to a much, much deeper truth.
The woman's response here is perfectly logical, and that's the whole point. She hears Jesus offer living water, and naturally, she takes him literally. She's thinking, "Buddy, you don't even have a bucket. How are you going to get me fresh running water from way down there?" She's stuck on the physical world, but Jesus is operating on a totally different level.
The key to this entire exchange is this Greek phrase, hýdōr zon. It's a fantastic bit of wordplay. Literally, it means fresh, flowing spring water, the good stuff. But metaphorically, it was a powerful Old Testament symbol for the life that flows directly from God. Jesus is using her physical thirst to start a conversation about a much deeper spiritual thirst we all have.
And this whole back and forth about water, it masterfully pivots the conversation to an even bigger topic, the very nature of worship itself. And this right here is where the encounter becomes truly revolutionary.
The woman brings up the central point of conflict between their people. Where do we worship? My mountain or your mountain? It was a debate about sacred real estate, and Jesus' answer just completely reframes the entire question. He basically says the place doesn't matter anymore. True worship isn't about location, it's about your spiritual posture, worshiping in spirit and truth, which is who God is.
Now the woman, sensing she's talking to someone extraordinary, maybe a prophet, says she knows the Messiah is coming, and he'll explain everything. And this just tees up one of the most direct, powerful statements in the entire narrative.
Jesus' response is just 2 words in the original Greek. But these 2 words, they carry an unbelievable weight of history and theology. The power here is just, wow. Ego eimi. Most translations add the word he to make it smoother in English, but the original is a stark, absolute I am. Now, for anyone familiar with the story of Moses at the burning bush, this would be an unmistakable echo of God's own divine name. It's incredible. To this Samaritan woman, a total outsider, Jesus gives one of his clearest declarations of who he is.
So what happens next? Well, this revelation doesn't just end the conversation, it completely transforms the woman and sets off a chain reaction that nobody could have predicted.
Her change is immediate and so symbolic. She leaves her water jar behind. Her whole reason for being there is now forgotten. In a culture where a woman's testimony was often dismissed, she runs and becomes a public witness. The irony is just stunning. This marginalized Samaritan woman becomes the very first evangelist in John's story, and her testimony is so powerful it brings her entire town out to meet Jesus.
You know, a story this rich, well, for 2,000 years, people have continued to find new layers of meaning within it. So let's just briefly touch on a few of these incredible interpretations.
Different traditions have seen her in completely different ways. You have someone like Augustine, who saw her as a symbol of the non-Jewish world being called to God. Origen took a more allegorical route, connecting her 5 husbands to our 5 senses. The Orthodox Church honors her as a saint, Saint Photini, which means the enlightened one. And a historical reading even suggests her 5 husbands could be a nod to the 5 foreign nations that settled Samaria centuries before. It's just amazing.
So to kind of wrap it all up, this one single conversation packs in some monumental themes. You get this profound revelation of Jesus' divine identity with the I am statement. You get a complete redefinition of worship, not about place, but spirit. You see a radical expansion of God's mission to include outsiders. And you see that salvation, while it comes through Jewish history, is meant for the whole world.
I mean, just think about this for a moment. For the original audience, hearing that the centuries-old fight between Mount Gerizim and Jerusalem was just irrelevant now, that would have been an absolute bombshell. It declared all the old boundaries obsolete.
And that leaves us with a final question. For us, right now, this story is a powerful account of crossing boundaries. It forces us to ask ourselves, what are the modern equivalents of that Samaritan-Jewish divide? Where do we build walls, socially, ethnically, religiously, that this story challenges us to tear down? It's a 2,000-year-old encounter that remains as provocative today as it was at that well at high noon.